And we're live. Not that we've had very many guests lately. Okay. So I will start the podcast, I guess. This is the Android Buffet Podcast, episode number 567, recorded Thursday, December 16th, 2021, in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. You missed your cue. Well, I understand that. Thursday is the day that I usually go to the office, and as per New York State mandate, now all indoor public spaces, which include offices, have a 100% mask policy unless everybody in the office is vaccinated. As telling with that, my office has a 100% mask policy. I will defer you to the governor. It's not the same governor it used to be if you haven't been following. We got rid of that guy. In my case, considering a few factors, I think the safest way for me to avoid getting sick would for me to not be in an office I have no reason to be in. But we all make compromises. They told me I didn't have to come next week. Apparently, that's my holiday reward. Anyway, so I find when I am wearing a mask, the metal piece tends to irritate my nose if I wear it for more than 3 or 4 hours. So 8 hours is a bit painful, so my nose is a bit red. Anyway, thus is life. So, other than that, it's been a actually a somewhat uneventful week in one way and a tiring week in another way. Lots of unexpected problems popping up here. But in good news, no more treadmills showed up. I was worried about that. Why isn't one more treadmill than expected and more than enough? Yeah, well, I haven't put any of them together. I think I mentioned that I hurt my right arm and I was waiting for the muscle to sort of stop being irritated before I try to lift an item that you're supposed to have 2 people lifting. So maybe over the weekend I'll put it together because then I can call them to get the other one. Or considering they haven't called me about it, you think somebody might have noticed by now that a multi-$100 item was sent twice. Hopefully there wasn't a charge for it. But anyway. But thus is life. Also lost my nightstand. Well, I decided I was going to change my sheets, and I moved the nightstand out of the way so I could pull the mattress out and tuck in the corners, and the top of the nightstand came off. I lost it as in it is no longer a functional nightstand. I could go back to the store that sold it to me. Yes. I could go back to the store that sold it to me, but the Sharper Image, to my knowledge, doesn't exist anymore. Although, to be fair, I think I bought it at some place that licensed the name. I don't think it was the original Sharper Image. But it was this nice little rolling nightstand that I could move away from the bed when I was cleaning. But so I went and immediately ordered a replacement of the closest item that I knew of, and it'll be here tomorrow. But until then, Yeah, 2 days isn't bad. It's hard because I need something of a that can have the little I have the little Nest Hub there, and I have the little sleep sensor, so I need something that can put all that stuff next to the bed. All my smart devices. Well, again, don't want to overdo it on those. But a lot happened this week that made me think. No, some weeks I don't have that much to put on here, but there's a lot of stuff. For example, the Android 12L beta. So L is the one that is for, we'll just call it special screen sizes. So that's large screens, where they're finally saying, yeah, so it's also known as 12.1. So 12L is essentially them trying to realize that they have not put enough work into tablet experiences or foldable experiences. And they want to essentially fix it. So most of the changes are for screens that can separate content into two sides. So that's in beta. So if you still will get an update if you have a non two-sided phone, but it won't really be that impressive for you. It may have a couple of little bug fixes, but it's a 0.1 release, so not that much going on. Yeah, the next one is not super cool. So there were a lot of stories about this, and I picked the one that actually went into the technical details. How a bug in Android and Microsoft Teams could have caused one user's 911 call to fail. So apparently, if this is one of those Confluence things, if you have the Microsoft Teams app, and I think they fixed it by now, installed but not logged in, there is a circumstance that can actually prevent you from dialing 911. And I would have been subject to this because my employer uses Microsoft Teams, but I never log into it on my phone unless I have a reason to, because I have so many other means that the people at my place of business can actually do things. Yeah. So the interesting thing about it is exactly how that happened. From there was one story which came from Medium that sort of went into the technical details, and apparently it's methods that decide which phone account should be used to handle an emergency call. And according to Google's documentation, apps which can place calls should build an instance of a specific class and register it. And that would include the Teams app, which uses the Skype backend to make phone calls. So, yeah. So, but since the Teams app doesn't handle emergency calling, it doesn't register with the flag that it can place emergency calls. So, apparently, when it goes through, if I'm understanding correctly, the problem being that if you're logged in, you get the flag, but if you're not logged in, you don't get the flag. But yet the feature that goes and figures out which phone line to use for emergency calls, apparently, even though you aren't logged in, it's apparently just crashing at that point because you have a registered but yet not fully configured phone account. If I understand the technical details, because I've never really delved into registering a phone provider on Android, but that's what it seems to describe. Anyway, in other news, TCL. You're familiar with them, right? They make televisions, among other things. Yeah, they make like I have a TCL Roku TV, and they started making Android TVs. We've talked about them a few times. They also, do you know that? Yeah, they make Android phones also. And you know that famous theater in Los Angeles, the one that they used to call the Chinese Theater? Okay, let me try a different approach. Have you ever been to Disney Hollywood Studios? You know that there's like a big, let's say, Asian themed theater that's the centerpiece of it, that used to have the Great Movie Ride and now has Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. I'm going to mis-explain. Okay, let's try it this way. Just look up what used to be called Grauman's Chinese Theater. That's the one oh how about this? It's the one where where famous people put their handprints in cement. Okay, I'm just going to at that point say look it up. Anyway, TCL makes electronics. So a few years ago, I don't remember how many years ago, I bought a 40 some I forget how many inches it is. 40 something inch, I think 47-inch 4K TCL Roku TV from TCL. So that's my current TV. So as a result, the I lost my entire train of thought because the log into your LastPass account thing just came up on my screen instead of what I was expecting, which was the show notes. So bad timing. Anyway, things happen. But okay, so TCL not makes Roku TVs, but they also diverged into making a line of equivalent TVs. They're essentially the same hardware, but a different SKU that uses the Android TV platform. Now, I know what I would want them to do if it were me. I would want them to make one TV where I could decide what platform I wanted and just go to their website and download one software or the other. Wouldn't that be great? So they've apparently pulled the Google TV versions of the line from Best Buy over complaints about buggy software. So even though Android TV or Google TV or whatever variant you have is something that's provided by Google and developed by them, their customizations for the hardware have to be done by the manufacturer. So apparently there's been some problems. Allegedly, it's the software. So I don't have one of the. If they were responsible for the drivers, it would be. So what I'm saying, yeah, but what I'm saying is, if the operating system is manufactured by Google, which it is, and they went in and did their essentially their drivers and customization on top of it, and that's what's malfunctioning. Now, this only refers to the 6 series lineup. Apparently, the 3 and 4 series lineup, which run the older version of Android TV, not the newer Google TV, are still being sold. So they've said that they're going to return the product to the store in the coming weeks after they've finished the software update. Their official comment was, our high performance TVs are constantly evolving, and recent software updates have allowed us to make significant progress. Our customers will see marked improvements. So essentially, they issued a product that had a bunch of bugs, and they shouldn't have done that, and they're correcting it. Well, again, other than that, I'm going to say as a TCL television owner of the Roku version of a clearly not the latest TV, because that's a few years old, that I've never had a problem with it. Again, different software, but the hardware is fine. I'm looking at it right now. I should watch more 4K content. Anyway, that's a whole other question. But moving along, last time or the time before, I know we talked about a privacy breach for people who sent in their pixels for repair, that they were getting their accounts or the photos on the device extracted. Uh, Google's responded that that is not from their employees, but they will be. Yeah, I'm agreeing with you, but they are going to take one action. Uh, which is they are going to ensure that there are new security instructions for those who cannot factory reset their phones before sending it off for repair. Because this is where the problem is, because they tell you when you send a phone off for repair to reset it, but what happens if the phone is broken to the point at which you can't actually get to the interface to reset it? And that's usually where these things are coming. So what... No, No, what it is they're saying that there are other ways to solve this problem. For example... Well, let's go, I haven't seen their security instructions, but here's my guess. Number one, go and log into your Google account on another device and revoke that device's access, which you can do. There's also things like, remote wiping of the phone, which once the repair people fix the phone, it should prompt the wipe. But you should be able to revoke the credentials, so it might be able to access the photos on the phone, in theory. But it wouldn't be able to get any account things that were outside of your phone. So it would at least eliminate the vector of account hacking. You could also, of course, in addition to that, change your password, just in case. So the only thing that would be really hard to do is, of course, on essentially with the device itself, any digital media stored on the device. So the solution to that would be, of course, encrypt the device. Lock it down a little more. But again, that's something you should do before your device breaks. Well, I have a little work to do in that area. Over the last few days, I replaced the hard drive on the computer that I use as my primary desktop when I'm at home. So the one that I've recorded many podcasts sitting in front of with you. And you know how it is whenever you reinstall the operating system on a computer? You have to reconfigure everything that you did. So I've been sort of up to that, and you sort of realize all the things that you just haven't bothered to check, update, or otherwise tweak in a few years. Yeah, so I'm still discovering those as I go along. Getting the ability to have a web browser is really fast, but getting to, configuring every single app and all of the other behaviors, it's sort of as you go and realize you haven't configured that yet. But it's the same thing. I did a whole bunch of security changes while I was doing that. For example, I'm running, I don't know how to pronounce it. Is it ButterFS or BetterFS? BTRFS. Well, I'm a Fedora user, and since I've been doing system upgrades, they switched the default a version or two ago from ext4 over to BTRFS, and I had not migrated because I would have had to format the drive. So since I swapped the drive, it seemed like a good time to adopt that, and that's the one with better SSD support, snapshot capability, and subvolumes. So all sorts of useful features. So there's a little more safety and security in one area, though there are other people who would say it's new and less stable, but you can't make everybody happy. But anyway, as much security as you can get. That's why every time I want to check anything other than the time on my new TicWatch, I have to enter in my passcode. Because I wanted to play with Google Pay on a watch. Anyway. Moving along. Apparently, according to one survey, more people want expandable storage in phones, but fewer and fewer phones have it. So, well, only because, remember, the people who read an Android-themed blog, who are the respondents, are not necessarily the normal sort of people. So essentially, out of 2,500 responses, 76% voted they would rather have the option for expandable storage than not. But again, those 2,500 people were people who read an Android-themed site. Well, for me, I want the option to upgrade the storage on a phone without having to replace the whole phone, which is a little different than saying that I want removable storage. I think I would want expandable storage, as in, why can't I, the same way that I just upgraded the hard drive on my computer, why can't I update the memory on my phone? Yeah, but no, people don't buy phones with removable batteries because all the removable battery phones are at the lower end of the hardware spectrum. If a carrier took a risk and offered a version of a phone with some of those features, there would be a percentage of the population who would buy it. Now, if you're saying that is that enough to justify the cost of another product SKU, it's hard to tell. But again, that's assuming that companies know what their consumers want instead of deciding what their consumers want. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm just saying that a lot of companies impose their own view of things instead of trying to find out from their users what they want. Is that a wrong thought? Yeah, but when they think about features, and I'm not sure I agree with that statement. What I'm saying is I don't necessarily agree with that statement 100%. I'm skeptical that the companies did the research to determine that or just decided we're going to take out the item and not enough people complained, which are two different things. But moving along, Chrome OS apparently has an experimental feature for snooping detection. So it engages the yeah, I was just about to explain it, but you explained it very well. Again, it may come to your desktop. The thing is, the reason why it's a little different on Chrome OS versus, let's say, Chrome on your computer, is then you're giving the browser would essentially have to handle it and then have access to the camera, and then there are other things. Now, could another operating system implement this? Yes, which is why I thought it was an interesting thing to mention. This is an interesting feature. Assuming that you trust whatever software to engage your camera all the time, which, there are privacy individuals who would be concerned about that, especially since you wouldn't be able to tell if your camera had been engaged for other reasons. This is not a bad thought. I don't know about you, and there's nothing really private on my computer most of the time, but I hate when people sneak up on me. Which is why in most places, even that I'm working, let's say I'm not talking about my home because there's less sneaking up there because I can configure the furniture, but I'm talking about if I'm in a public place. Let's say today I was in my place of business, which I mentioned I'm going to now once a week. I hate when people sneak up behind me. They certainly can because my back is to somewhere where they could sneak up on me. So I hate it when people do that, even though clearly everything on the screen is not something private because it's part of the company that we would both work for in this case. I don't think I have anything classified from my coworkers, not that I want them to see everything. But it just drives me crazy when people sneak up behind me. Especially since when I'm really focused on something, I won't notice until they're practically on top of me. So I would love the feature of being notified and taken out of what I'm doing because somebody's approached me. I wonder if I can build it. I have all this home automation stuff. Wouldn't work at my place of business, but I'd be curious to see if I could build a feature to alert me of what's happening behind me. It can't necessarily be a motion sensor unless it's positioned very because I move. So I'm curious. I'll have to think about that. Uh, well, no, because most of the time here I'm using a desktop. So it's not like a laptop where I can go between rooms. Yeah, although I did have a problem today when I came home. One of the cameras didn't turn off, and I have to go do a little diagnosis to figure out why. So 2 out of 3 turned off, and I switched all the USB power things to ones that are running Tasmota over something else because I wanted more local control because it wasn't always working before. But like many things, I have like a list of bugs I should go through. So, moving along, Google sent a Philippine storm alert to Pixel owners around the world. Yeah, apparently they showed a local alert worldwide. So again, things happen, but apparently this is one of those bugs that I'm sure they'll fix. Well, anybody who clicked on it realized where it was coming from. Especially since the alert said public storm warning signal number 1, Pagasa. And I'm sure if you had, I'm assuming you didn't see it. So I'm assuming that had you seen it, you would have said, wait a minute, why am I getting an alert from the Philippines Storm Service? After you Googled what Pagasa was. I'm not saying you would have known what Pagasa was. I'm just saying you would have looked it up and you would have said, wait a minute. Anyway, there were several interesting posts about Android 12's Go edition. So specifically by the blog.google, the Android section of it. Yeah. But again, apparently they did a bunch of things for the upcoming version. That's Now the version is out, but again, it takes time for it to get to devices. So they've done faster load time, longer battery life, a more intelligent feature. So essentially, the whole idea of Go is it is optimized for these devices that have less power. Now, the thing I always wonder is why can't my device be optimized in the same way? And since I have more power, to work even better. But I know it doesn't work that way, but that's the first thing I always think. I know. I'm saying I know that isn't the case. I'm just saying that's the first thing that comes to mind. I do have several of the Go Edition apps installed because I find some of the other ones I don't really need the extra features. For example, I do have Google Photos installed, but I also have Gallery Go, which is the stripped down version that just lets you look at your photos without all the other stuff. And I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that. It isn't updated as often, but again, it shows me photos, and that's what I want it to do. Yeah, and I had to get rid of half the gallery apps I used to use in the past that just did that. If you remember, because they got taken over by companies and turned into trash that showed ads every 5 minutes or other. Well, I don't know about you, but I hate it when a good app sells to a new company and all of a sudden, I'm not talking about them putting in features I don't like, but all of a sudden you realize they bought the app purely for the purpose of turning it into a garbage pile. So the Google Home app has added a D-pad for the Android TV remote. You don't know what a D-pad is? Okay, you didn't know that the Google Home app actually has a built-in Android TV remote. It was only put in the previous update, so that would have been in the fall, I think. No, that would have been in the fall. So if you open up your Android TV device or other device that has remote control in the Google Home app, it'll show you the option for a remote, and now that remote has a D-pad. Yeah, well, I ended up with an extra Android or TV device because remember I bought the Walmart one for like 15 bucks. I left that in my grandparents' place in Florida, but I decided I wanted one more, and I put it in the same box as that Lenovo Smart Clock, so I ended up with two more. When they made that shipping mistake. Well, they told me to keep it. I didn't ask the people with the treadmill about that because that's a whole other thing. But I was fine with keeping an extra smart clock and an extra little Android TV device. But it's much easier to store. So if you are concerned that people might be sticking Apple trackers on you to spy on you, Apple has released a tracker detector for Android. So Apple has its little AirTags, which are again, like Tiles or one of those things, where these little Bluetooth devices that again will report where you are. I think some of them also use NFC, ultra wideband. I forget what other technologies are in there. But essentially, if you think that somebody has, let's say, hidden an AirTag somewhere in order to track you, they've essentially put an app in that would allow you to locate the tracker by prompting it to play a sound at least 10 minutes after being separated. So this will work if it's not connected up to whoever owns it. Yeah. Yeah, so this was designed essentially to deal with the idea that, let's say, I'll give Jerry, would you mind playing a malicious person in my example? I don't want to hurt your feelings. Okay, so you're a malicious person and you've decided that you want to spy on me for whatever reason. So you come to see me. Okay. You don't need to follow me because what all you need to do is you meet up with me and you somehow sneak into my bag or some other thing that I have around, like my car or what have you. You sneak an AirTag in where you don't think I will find it. So the AirTag goes around town, and either you could, of course, follow the car and keep an eye on the AirTag, or because the AirTag, like all of these devices, will report in if it's picked up by another device that can pick it up, you can know where I went. So the problem being that these devices are compatible with Apple devices, which means there are ways to do it on there. But people are complaining, well, a lot of people have Android devices. This could be stuck on a person who has an Android device. They have no way to know that this happened. So Apple released a very simple Android app that essentially locates AirTags that have been separated from their owners and makes them play a sound. So essentially, if you think that somebody might do this, you can check it. Now, the only question is, what if you don't think somebody is doing this? But again, we're back to if you don't think somebody is doing this, you won't expect it anyway. Also, if your phone has NFC, uh, after you find the device, you could actually tap the tracker with the device, and it will present the owner's contact details for you to return it to them. Well, there is always the possibility that somebody lost it in a different scenario. To quote Apple, Tracker Detect gives Android users the ability to scan for an AirTag or supported Find My enabled item trackers that might be traveling with them without their knowledge. See, I want this for Tile, considering that Tile was just bought out by Life 360 and there are a bunch of privacy concerns there. And I still have a bunch of tiles. I think I mentioned that I bought my parents a whole bunch of tiles because they keep losing things. Yeah, but if Life 360 owns them, I might have to find a new provider. I've never paid for any of the I've never paid for any of the premium tile features. Although I really don't understand why some of those features are premium, other than I know they need to make money somehow. So moving along, if you are a user of the Google Calendar app, they apparently are starting to add in an account switcher. So the same sort of thing they have in other Google apps where you can switch between accounts. So right now it's really not clear which calendars are being shown from which account. I think making it like all of the other Google apps makes life a lot easier. Yeah. What, from Outlook or something else? Well, I'm stuck on Outlook, but what I did was I made a whole some calendar linkages because I was tired of two different apps notifying me. So essentially, I have a link to my work calendar in the Google Calendar app as a separate calendar, and did a few tweaks in terms of the notifications. Also, I have the Nextcloud integration. I have too many different ways to get the same thing. I really need to sort of simplify it. Project for another day, because as you may have heard over the years, I have a lot of projects that one day I will get all of them done. Or probably not. Well, probably not because I keep adding new projects. Amazon is shutting down and this is one of the few times I'm going to say this word because it'll set off something, the Alexa web ranking service. So this is not the Amazon Echo service. This is the web ranking service that they bought a while back. So I remember in many cases where people would ask me what the ranking on that service was of my website. Always incredibly low because nobody wants to come see Android Buffet apparently, but at least not compared to some larger sites. But again, it's the end of an era. Not that there aren't other web ranking services, but Amazon's shutting this one down. I didn't realize they bought it until I saw this article. Because I had thought about it when they introduced the Echo about why they were using that name, but also how miserable it's making people who happen to have that name legally. Well, I feel bad for those people. You get a you get a name, and then all of a sudden, a product is released that whenever you say that name, it activates a device. That's why I really wish that Amazon would make it so you can customize the wake word. Train it to go to a different word of your choosing. Although they did change it. Well, they did change. They do allow you to. They have like four other ones, including the most recent one, which is you can wake it with the word Ziggy. The one they added, the most recent wake word they added as an alternative, because originally you could wake it with either the stock one or you could wake it with computer or Echo. They recently added in Ziggy. Not really. Well, I felt the computer was a reference to like the Star Trek style computers. That one, yeah. Ziggy is a reference to the computer from Quantum Leap. So essentially, they're letting you use alternate wake words from like sci-fi computer interfaces. I'm sure that might be a like an issue there where they'd have to talk to Paramount. Well, same thing with some of the other ones where there might be more considerations. I think Ziggy is the point at which they could sort of say that's not currently being used. Quantum Leap went off the air in what, 93, 94. But when you get to even computer is just generic enough. But when you get to Zora, that's a proper name of a character. The same thing they're probably not going to put in Cortana, although somebody else used that one, so you wouldn't want to do that anyway. But I'd like to sort of customize it. What if I want to say Ralph and have my device wake up? Although what would happen if they actually allowed you to customize it. People would customize the Amazon device to respond to the Google wait word and vice versa, which would add to a lot of confusion. Yeah, yeah. Again, it's back to I would love the future. We'll see if it ever happens. Uh, since we were talking about media, I did find a few interesting media stories. NBC Universal will be adding the majority of the films from their various film studios. Uh, Not all of them, but the majority as soon as 45 days after theatrical release. So I thought I'd mention this because this is really changing the landscape for new release films. I think the pandemic sort of accelerated the move towards new models for that. I'm not saying that the theater model was not struggling before 2020, but like many things, it sort of accelerated the change. The same way it accelerated the change for hybrid work. So potentially exciting. I don't have to leave my house to watch movies 45 days after release. Except I don't watch that many movies, so I still haven't gotten around to watching what was that movie that came out? The Marvel movie with the rings. I forget what that's called. Uh, if you are a Paramount Plus subscriber, yeah, I'm not the biggest Marvel fan. It took me years to catch up on those movies, but I was finally up to date, and I hate to spoil the streak. Uh, but if you are a Paramount Plus subscriber, which I am guessing from the Zora reference you are, Jerry, let's assume. I'm assuming. Okay, apparently Paramount Plus is rolling out a linear channels feature. So they already do. They have a live TV function for your local CBS affiliate, but apparently the live channels allow them to have essentially program channels. So essentially, it's curated playlists. So if you tune into their crime live channel, it's a curated playlist of crime stuff. So apparently they're starting out things with a let's see, with a sitcom channel, adult animation, drama, children's animation, etc. Apparently there's even a Star Trek program channel. To do it. Well, the sort of nice thing about this is curation is really good when you can't decide what you want. Because the big problem with streaming services is they have so much content from the past. How do you really decide what you want? It's sort of nice to say, okay, fine, we're going to curate some popular stuff for you. What I really want is a channel that's going to curate some stuff that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to find. Because a lot of these curated channels are, like very popular things. What if I want the niche product? What if I want the channel that's going to show me the television show that was good but never really got traction that I might rediscover? Yeah, but again, if it's human curation, you can't do that. So there's sort of the combination between human curation and computer curation, and I think both have a place. Computers are not good enough to decide what's necessarily good, at least for me. Moving along, if you are a fan of the classic Nintendo game, apparently Netflix is making a live-action Mega Man movie. I thought I'd mention it because I used to play Mega Man a lot when I was a kid. Did you ever play Mega Man, Jerry? Okay. It was an original Nintendo game that had 20 sequels. Every so often I revisit it, when I feel nostalgic. There are a few things that used to annoy me about that game. It was one of those games where you shot things and then picked up things, which are a lot of games. But it was a scroller, so if you scrolled to the next screen and then you went back, suddenly in some of the screens, the things that you already claimed would just reappear, as if you hadn't done anything with them. Which I always considered to be a bug, but some people consider it a feature because they can go back and get the thing multiple times. Anyway, moving along to one bit of news that I think you might have an opinion on. LastPass is spinning off from LogMeIn again. So essentially, they were bought 6 years ago, and they're going to go back to being a independent company next year. I don't know how to feel about this. Well, actually, I got the impression it's because LogMeIn is going off somewhere and wants to shed it. Well, let me see. I saw something about that. So log me in. It essentially, I think something about a public offering is what I thought I heard. But either way, they're going into a bunch of other things, and I'm guessing that they decided they didn't want this part of their portfolio, so they're spinning it off to go do its own thing. It's a good niche product, so I don't think it's a problem being on its own. And I'm sure they'll figure out the rest of it. Anyway, we'll see what happens with it. But it actually pushed me in the other direction to wonder if it's time to look into alternatives again. Well, I didn't look. This is the thing. I didn't look into alternatives very aggressively when we ended up in the other direction. By the way, Daryl is saying that there is no audio from you, which is weird. I don't know how it's happening because Well, that's the thing. The input for the audio is the one that I'm hearing. So if you said something right now, I should hear you, don't I? Yeah, so that's strange because my headphones are coming out of the same input that goes into the streamer. But I'm sorry, I just noticed the message because I was engaged here. You want me to tell Daryl he's holding it wrong? He may have left because he could only hear one of us. But I'll investigate that again because every time I think I fixed everything and don't change anything, something changes somehow, which is extremely frustrating. The whole reason that I switched from software to hardware was so that I could just leave it there doing nothing every week or move it to a different place and have it do nothing. So the hardware streamer just sits on my desk. If I go on a trip, I toss it into my bag, but I never change the configuration on it. So I don't know. Disappointing. But I was going to say, because of the whole thing with LastPass, I was thinking of looking into Bitwarden. Are you familiar with Bitwarden, Jerry? Okay, so Bitwarden is open source. And while, again, I am not against closed source products, I tend to favor open source. And not only can you, what I understand, you can self-host it, but they do have, like anything else, hosting plans. So I like a product that either I could pay somebody else to handle or take care of myself. Yeah. Now they have plugins for all of the major browsers. They have a desktop application for, again, all the major operating systems, including Linux, which, by the way, LastPass does not have a desktop app. They have a mobile app. They have a command line. Gotta love command line. And they have a web app. So that's appealing to me. And again, just haven't decided. So according to their thing, you can, if you go to bitwarden.com, you could get a free account with core features of a personal vault and managing your data from any location, device, or device type. If you have a premium account, which is, and I'm talking about the personal, not the business plans, a premium account is $10 a year, and that gives you access to features like advanced two-factor emergency access, authenticator, etc. And then they have a two-person or a family plan. So you can get a free two-person organization forever. So essentially, if it's you just want to share it with one other person, that's free. If you want to share it with up to 6 people, that's $333 a month. So the pricing isn't, bad. And just looking at the features, the enhanced two-factor would be the premium is the one that supports YubiKey, FIDO and Duo, so essentially hardware two-factor. They give you 1 gigabyte of encrypted attachments. You can't do their authenticator without the premium account, as well as emergency access, health reports, priority support, and again, in all cases, there's self-hosting options. So I've heard a lot of people talk about Bitwarden, and some people have said even though they were perfectly capable of self-hosting, they felt better having somebody else do it because then you get backup and other things. Well, that's the thing. I've talked to a lot of people who said, yeah, I know how to self-host, I know how to build a server, but I don't want to go through that hassle all the time. And, I understand that. I don't always want to go through the hassle of doing certain things, and I pay other people to do it. But I like having both options. Especially if I can say one day, I'm not going to pay you anymore, I'm just going to export the data and run my own server. Or the other way around, I'm running my own server, but it's too much of a hassle, I'm going to pay them. Either way it works. And finally, apparently Roku and Google have settled their YouTube dispute, which you should have noticed because the YouTube app did not disappear from your Roku. Not that it would have. Yeah, which again, it meant that they wouldn't have been updating it, which means it could have eventually broken. In theory. But either way, they've settled their dispute. There has been no indication of who agreed to what, and what compromises they made. But apparently they worked it out. So good for them. I like the word huzzah. I never use it, but it's a great word, isn't it? To do what? Okay. So, shall we adjourn until next week? Next week is, of course, next week is the 23rd. I'm not sure if you're busy that night. There's some sort of thing going on the following night, I think, for some people. Okay. You also free on the 30th. Okay. I may have to change the 6th, as I mentioned, because I may go down and see my parents, but I may adjust it. There's a JetBlue sale today, so I bought because you can now buy tickets and then cancel them without penalty and get your money in their bank. I have three different potential itineraries. Well, as long if it's sort of the consideration. If I think there's a possibility that I might go down there a few days early if I can make it work. I can buy the ticket, and as long as I cancel it at least a week in advance, I get my money deposited into the JetBlue Travel Bank, and I could use it for a future trip. So what's the loss to me? Eventually, they're going to take that feature away, but as long as it's there, why not? It makes me feel comfortable giving JetBlue money, which, remember, they aren't giving me back in the form of cash. They're still holding on to it and collecting interest. So if they're happy, I'm happy. Anyway, shall we adjourn until next week? Let's say goodbye to Daryl. Uh, I'm going to translate by Daryl. And sorry, as I said, hardware is there so that I do not have to worry about this, but something keeps happening and it really frustrates me. Yeah, well, I will figure it out at some point. The problem is, in order for me to test it, I need uh, to replicate the conditions. So if I'll check everything, but nothing has been touched. So I don't know why somebody wouldn't hear you, because unless one of the wires is loose, which is, I suppose, a theoretical possibility, the audio goes into the device and then it goes out of the device on a wire directly into the streamer. So I suppose I could take the line out from the audio device, have something playing to pretend to be you, like a file, and then listen to what the audio sounds like. But I'll do some testing. But sorry to anybody who listened. The other audio will be up soon.